We are on the sections 10.1 and 10.2. Solving quadratic equations using the square root property and by completing the square. We said in this class, mainly we just learn one thing. Doing what? Solving quadratic equation, right? So what kind of things are quadratic equations? Standard form. Quadratic equations means what? X with square, right? To the second power. Standard form would be what? Bx plus c equals 0. Standard form, right? Everything on the left hand side, right hand side is only zeros. So if you write, say, 2x squared minus, say, minus 2 equals 0. Is this a quadratic equation in standard form? Yes. What is A? A is 2. What is B? B is 0, right? Then C is 2. Even B is missing. Or if you have 2x squared equals 0, is this a quadratic equation? See, as long as you have square, then that is a quadratic equation, right? However, if you have a 3x plus 3 equals 0, is this a quadratic equation? No, because you don't have what? X squared. Then for this one, A is 0, B is 3, C is 3, right? So for a quadratic equation, A cannot be 0 because otherwise you don't have a square, right? B or C can be 0. Okay? So then A, B, C are real numbers because 0 is a real number as well, right? So we are talking about solving quadratic equation. Can be what? Trinomial, can be binomial, can be a what? Monomial. Okay, as long as you have x squared there. Then we learned how to solve quadratic equation like before if we have this one. How many terms we have? 3, trinomial, right? So for trinomial, usually we use which method? AC method, right? So your A is what? 1, C is 7, -7. That's your AC, right? B is what? 5. Then we try to find the two numbers. Multiply together is -7. Added together is 5. Then you can see -7 can be 7 times what? -1 or -7 times 1, right? But when you add them together, cannot make 5, positive 5. So AC method is what? You only have two numbers like this one to factor, right? So the method for solving quadratic equation, we learned first method was what? By factoring, right? That's what we did earlier. But however, right now, we cannot do it. Then we need to learn other methods, okay? So second method is called by using square root property, okay? Then we see what it is. Then third one is what? By completing the square. Method, okay? Then another one is called by the quadratic formula. Then we see what it is. All right, so factoring is easy, right? That's from your section 6.6, easy, but may not work, right? Okay, then let's see some quadratic root property. What do we mean by that? Okay, so if you have this way, let's practice the second method. Okay, using quadratic, using the square root property. So when I have x squared equals 9, right? The old way is what? The method 1 is what? We always write it in standard form. So you minus 9, method 1 is factoring, right? Use the standard form. Then this is the difference of two squares. So you have x minus what? Not 9, is 3, x plus 3, right? Equals 0. Then by 0 property, one of them has to be 0 to be able to multiply together becomes 0, right? Then this one, your x is 3. Then this one, x is what? -3. When you have one side, it's x squared, you move it to another side, the number, you end up, you have what? Positive or -3. Sometimes we write positive or -3. We write it this way, okay? That means what? You can just do it directly. You say x squared equals 9, it must be what? Positive 3, -3. Take a square would be 9, right? So you can just write x equals what? Not only 3, you need to do what? Positive and negative. I write it big for you to remember, but you will always forget. Okay? So when do we use the square root property? Look at that, right? It means what? When one side is a perfect square, right? One side is a perfect square and another side is what? Is a number, right? Just a number. Then you just take a square root of that, 9, right? So what you do is you write plus and minus square root of 9, because you take a square, then you do the opposite, you take a square root, right? It's like, okay, x squared equals 9. If I take a square root, then this one would be x, right? So, and you need to plus minus 3. And however, what's the difference between this and that earlier? One, you have what? Plus and minus. Don't forget. Because when you take a square root, you only use, when you use this symbol, you only take what? A principal root, which is only positive side, right? So we use the second method, which is what? By square root property. When one side is a perfect square, another side is a number, you can just do it directly, right? But don't forget your positive and negative sign, right? Not only the principal root, you also have negative side will work. Okay? Then if you look at the number 2, x squared equals -9. do you have one side is a perfect square, another side is a number, right? But what do you think? Anything take a square can be negative number? Not really. Or you can do it x equals what? Plus minus square root of -9, right? But we said the even root, inside the even root, you cannot have a negative number, right? So, okay, so your answer can be what? Not a real number or doesn't exist. Either one will be fine. Okay? The reason we said not a real number because we have a fake number for it, okay? Which is called imaginary number. But we are not covering here. You will learn this in your pre-calculus class, okay? For a reason we did that, right? So if one side is a square, another side is a negative number, you don't have to do it. You just say, doesn't exist. That's good enough. All right. So if I have x squared equals 20, what do you think? Can I use the square root property? Yes, because when one side is a perfect square, another side is a number. Then we want to get x by itself. We have to get rid of the square. Then what do? We take the opposite, the square root. But if you do one side, you have to do another side. Then you make a mistake because you have to have what? Plus and minus there. Plus and minus. Right? Are we done? Not really. Why not? Remember, the radicals, crazy numbers, just like your fractions, you have to do something about it and check. Like fractions, the denominator cannot be 0, right? But then same thing for fractions, you have to simplify as simple as possible. Same thing for the radicals. Remember 4 rules for the radicals, right? No negative inside the radical, right? No fraction inside the radicals. Also inside the radicals have to be as simple as possible. No roots. If you have roots, you have to take outside, not inside the roots, right? Square root. Root of square has to show the root, okay? Also, no radicals in the denominators, okay? So for this one, you check 2 times 2 times 5, right? Then root of square, you do have a square, you have to show the roots. So you should do 2 outside, square root of 5 out, right? That's why we learn what? The crazy numbers for the purpose of solving quadratic equations. Okay? Because the number is not exactly a good number, you can just square it. It has the decimals forever, but for the accuracy, we use the radical symbols to keep it there. Okay? Next one, 5x squared minus 55 equals 0. Which method you will use? You can use factoring, easy one. But when you see, oh, I just have a square, I just have a number. We can use square root property. Then we will move the number away, right? So we will have what? 5x squared equals 55. Then we want to get x by itself. We make a what? X square root. Right? X squared. Then take a square root for it. Then you take square root will be what? plus minus. So when you do that, take a square root plus minus of 11. Then that would be your x. Then your answer would be what? Plus minus square root of 11, right? So we are practicing the second method by the square root property. When one side is a perfect square, another side is a number, then we can do that. Okay? Then sometimes it's not only a x squared on the one side. How about this one? X plus 2 squared. But this side still is a square. As long as it's square, I get rid of square root, get rid of square, then I have x plus 2, then I can find my x, right? So we use the square root property, so we can say, okay, take a square root, take a square root. Then you only get a half credit. Why? Remember, when you use square root, you need to have what? Plus minus, both sides, right? Then this one, you don't have to worry about that. And we have what? X plus 2 equals square root of 18, right? Then you simplify this, become what? 2, 3, 3, right? Then you take a 3 out, so you have plus minus 3 square root 2, right? But we need to find the x. So actually, I want you to see it first, this way. Then we can put it together, all right? It means what? It means x plus 2 can be positive, can be negative. If you isolate your x, you do that, x becomes what? Negative 2 plus 3 square root 2, or x equals negative 2 minus square root 2. Actually, they are conjugates, right? So on the computer, if you don't have plus minus sign together, a symbol together, you cannot write it together. You need to separate them. But for your home, if you're for the test, and you can just write it this way. Put it together means what? You have two answers. One is plus, one is a minus. Right? So we are solving what? Still a quadratic equation, x to the second power, right? With the second method called what? Square root property. If you have this one, 3x minus 1 to the negative 4. Anything can multiply itself twice become negative? No way, right? So you don't have to do anything. You just say x equals this. Doesn't exist. All right. So, however, if you forgot, usually, sometimes, a lot of the time, you forget. Okay? Then you say, oh, I remember the square root property. I take the square root, right? You even put a plus minus there, right? But when you see it, 3x minus 1 equals plus minus, then you should stop here now, because we say what? Under the even root, you cannot have a negative number inside. Okay? So, we did the second method, solving quadratic equations by using square root property. Okay? Now we are going to, by completing the square method. okay? This method is kind of complicated, but we need to understand the background of it so you can do the circles, ellipse later on in your 154A class, okay? So we need to learn that skills. Let's see. That means if I can make one side it's a square, another side is a number, then I always can solve it by square root property, right? So I want to make one side become a complete square, okay? So first, let's review how to complete a square. Okay, so let's review this. If I have x minus 2 take a square, what do I have? You do the FOIL, right? Plus 4, the middle side will be what? Twice. Let's do 1 first. Okay? So that will be 1, that will be 2x. Right? If it's x plus 1 square, what do you have? Then plus 1, the middle one will be plus. Right? If I have x plus 5 square, what do I have? X squared, I have 25. Right? Then middle part would be multiply them and double it, 10x. Right? So if I go backwards, if I have x squared plus say 12x plus 36, what do you think? Can I make a complete square? Right? Because if I do 6 times 6 is 36, 6 times 2 times x will be 12x, right? When we do this way, the middle part will be double it. When we go backwards, how do we get 6? We divide it, right? Divided by 2, because half of it will be this one. If you multiply, you double, it becomes 12. Okay? But the third number will get from after you get this number. Is that right? So we need to know how to complete square first, so we can make one side is a square, so we can solve it, right? So look at the example, x squared minus ax plus 16. Do you think you can make a square? Half of this is what? Negative a half. It's a negative, right? X minus 4. Will that work? Because if you do double, will be negative 8. Negative 4 squared will be what? 16. Okay? However, if I give you x squared minus 10x plus something, I don't give you the third term, because the third term depends on the number you put inside. Then you get it from here, right? So third term has to be what? Depending on the b. So what do? You do minus half of b. Here will be half of your b. Your b is negative 10, will be 5, right? If this is negative 5, this number is fixed. Has to be what? Take square. This number has to be 25. Okay? So you need two numbers, first two terms, to decide your square, the number inside. Then the third term will be depicted by the number inside. Then you need a number to finish the completed square. Right? Okay. So let's see. Next one. X squared plus 12x plus something. Then we want to make a complete square. So that's your x. Leading coefficient is 1. It's x. X squared. So it's easier. You can find a number. What do you think this number should be? Should be half of this. Will be positive 6. Right? Once you have this 6, then you fill in the third term. It has to be what? 36 to make it work becomes what? A square. Right? So what we do is we will, use the first two terms, to find the third term. To make a complete square. Is that right? Something square, right? Also, the leading coefficient is 1. Right? That would be much easier, invisible 1. So if leading coefficient is 1, we do this way. Then by first two terms, then we decide the third term we needed. So then we have a complete square. Okay, that's what we need to do to be able to complete the square. If we have this one, what do you think? Leading coefficient is 1, that's good. X. Which number will work? Half of the B, right, will be 5/2. Don't use 2.5. Okay, from now on, you always use fractions for accuracy. So, because like 1/3, you cannot make, good number is forever decimals. So, we just use fractions. So 5/2, take a square, will be what? 25/4, right? We need to use the first two terms to find the third term to be able to make a complete square. All right, and let's see some examples. Okay, then we write down the method. So let's see the example on your B. Then first one, 2x squared minus 4x minus 30 equals 0. Okay, we will go through ones first, then we'll write down the steps. Okay, to make a complete square, we have x inside, so we can solve it. We don't want to have 2 there. So how can we get rid of 2? Leading coefficient is 1, right? So we can just divide it by 2. If you divide it by 2, everyone divided will be divided by 2. So x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. Right? This one you can just factor it. But we are practicing the third method by completing a square. We want to make one side is a square, right? But when we make one side is a square, we cannot have a number there because that will not fit, right? So what do? We need to move the number away, plus 15 on each side, right? So this way we can fill in our square. Because the third term is depicted by first two terms. So which number will work? That would be minus 1, right? Half of a B. Half of B. Right? Then if this one is negative 1, you need the third term. When you FOIL, then that will be plus 1. Right? But the 1 wasn't there at the first place. Then if I add one side, I need to add 1 to another side as well. Right? Then, do I have a complete square? Yes, on this side. This side will be 16. right? Then what do? Use the method 2 with what? Square root property. So I can just take this one, take a square root, right? 16. But don't forget, what do you need? A step extra, remember plus and minus. Okay, so what do we have? Cancel out here, x minus 1 equals what? Plus minus 4, right? Don't just add 1 into it. You say, oh, x equals plus minus 3. It's not right. You better check because you make such a mistake easily. Okay, so that's why I want to show you. You need to write it separately. Plus 4 or x minus 1 equals negative 4, right? Then when you plus 1 on each side, see what you have? X is 5 or x is negative 3. So your answer is those two, not plus minus 3. You cannot just do it plus 1 because negative 4 plus 1 is 5. It's not negative 3 or positive 3, right? So we have to write it separately, okay, for numbers for sure. And to see, when you add both sides, then you get a 5 and negative 3, not just plus minus 3, right? Okay, that's how we do what? Solving a quadratic equation that was original, right? Solving a quadratic equation, use what kind of methods? We are using the completing the square method, right? Let's write down our thinking. See how we actually doing it. Okay, so we need to do what? We need to have what? One side just 2 terms, another side is a number, right? So first step is what? Leave, okay, just do the leave 2 terms on the left side of the equation, right? Then make the number to the other side. Is that right? Okay, so we do that first. And then what do? We also want the what? At the same time, make the complete square, right? When we make a complete square, we want to just have x. So we wanted to make a complete square like this, right? On the left hand side. Okay, at the same time, you need to add 1 term for it by adding a 3rd term, right? At the same time, we want to have what? With leading coefficient equals 1. So we can do x plus something. You can solve easily, right? Then what do we do after that? We will make like this, x something squared, right? Then inside here, how do we make it? This negative 1, we take a half of a b, right? So to make a complete square, x plus something, then this one will be what? Half of a b, right? If it's positive, positive. It's negative, negative. Right? Then we need what? Add the third term. So we will add the third term. B over 2 squared, right? If it's 1, 1 squared. If 2, 2 squared. There, right? Also, we need to do this. Also, add this. When we add this number, we need to what? Add this number to the other side as well, like here, right? Other side of the equal sign, right? Then after that, we finish all our complete square, right? Then we take a square root both sides and we solve it, right? Then we will apply the method 2, which was what? The square root property, right? Square root property to find our property. Okay, to find the x. Is that what we were doing? Right? Not too bad, right? Manageable. You might get confused at first, but take some practice. Okay? Later on, we don't need this method anymore. You have other method to do it. Just use the formula to plug in. But we need to learn this method for your 154 class. We need these skills. Okay? So practice some. All right. Let's follow the steps. See, we can do that. 3a squared minus 6a equals 12. Okay? First step. Leave two terms on one side, leave the number on the other. We did. Okay? Then we are going to make a complete square on this side. But we want a leading coefficient is 1. So how can we make a leading coefficient is 1? Divided by 3, right? So we have a squared minus 2a equals 4, right? Leading coefficient is 1. Then we want to make something like complete square, like this. A, right? With a number. Then this number will be what? Half of a b. So b is negative 2, so half of b will be negative 1, right? Then to make a complete square, you have to have a third term to match with your FOIL, right? When you FOIL out. So this one will be plus 1. Then for the equation, we need to add it to another side as well, right? You add one side, you add another side, right? Now, one side is a complete square, then this side is 5, right? Then, we have one side is a square, one side is number. We use what? The square root property. So a minus 1 is what? Remember your plus minus, take a square root. Square root is 5, right? Then, how do you write your answer? You need to add 1 on both sides. A becomes what? 1 plus minus square root of 5. Right? Because you have square root of 5 and negative square root of 5. You add 1. Add 1 would be what? 1 plus square root of 5 and 1 minus square root of 5. Right? That's how we do the what? The third method to solve quadratic equations using the completing the square method. Okay? m squared plus 3m minus 2 equals 0. Let's take a look. We just use this. It says make a 2 term on left hand side, number to another side. So you add a 2 on both sides, right? Then second, make a complete square. Then with the leading coefficient is 1, yes. Then make a square, right? So you have m something squared. Then which number will work? It said that number will be what? Half of a b. So half of b is what? 3/2, right? So for these 3/2, you need the third term to match. You have to FOIL, take a square, will be 9/4, right? Then you do one side, you do another side. You have to do it on both sides, right? Then 2 plus 9/4. How do you do your fractions? Put the 1 underneath, find the LCD, right? Is that right? That would be what? 17/4, right? Then you use what? Go back, use the method 2, the square root property. You take a square root on both sides, right? That's fine. Then you will forget about what? Your plus minus sign. Don't forget, right? Then you still need to check your crazy numbers, radicals, because we cannot have fractions inside the radicals, right? You need to simplify. Remember how to simplify your radicals from your chapter 9? So you can write a what? 17/4, right? Then if you do that, then you have this, right? Because square root is 4. Square root of 4 is a good number. So you have m plus 3/2 equals what? Plus minus square root of 17/2, right? Then you minus what? 3/2 on each side, but they are not like terms. You don't combine them. So your m is what? Negative 3/2 plus minus 17 square root of 17/2. That means you have what? Negative 3/2 plus square root of 17/2. Also have what? Negative 3/2 minus square root of 17/2. Right? That would be your answer. Remember this now? It will take you a while, okay? Take you a while to sink in. Each problem will take you some time to do it, actually, okay? So, then 2x squared minus 16x plus 34 equals 0, right? Then usually you look at it, we ask you to do the completing the square method. Then your mind just went blank, okay? Remember the steps. If you go back to steps, look again and think about it, you might be able to connect, okay? So just by practice, then just follow the steps. You start to connect and sink in, okay? So first, leave 2 terms on one side. So we are going to move this away, right? 2x squared minus 16x, maybe 34, right? The next step, make this side complete a square, then with the leading coefficient is 1. So we divide it by 2, that would be 8x equals negative 17, right? Then we need a third term to complete it, the square. So, which number? Half of a b, which is -4, right? Then when you FOIL, then you should have 16 here to make a complete square. Then for the equation, you have what? You add one side, you add another side, right? So we end up this what? -1. If so, something take a square is a negative number, what do you think your answer is? Because you cannot have negative number when you take a square, right? So you have x equals what? No solution. Or you say doesn't exist. Either one is fine. All right, so that will be your section 10.1, 10.2 on your page 50 and 51.